After returning home, I saw a new hot dog stand opening up at the entrance of the community. I walked over and ordered one. The vendor was wearing a duckbill cap and a mask, but even so, I could tell he was a handsome guy. Lost in thought, the vendor across suddenly asked, "Would you like to add a fried egg?" I nodded. "Yes, add one of everything. No, make it 3. Before I could finish, the vendor raised his head, and his eyes visible outside the mask glanced at me. Then, the assistant standing next to me whispered in my ear, "Selena, why does that vendor look so much like that idol you used to like?" "The one on your phone wallpapered." I lowered my head and looked at my phone. Before the screen went dark, there was a boy on the wallpaper. The spotlight was on him, standing in front of a microphone, eyes closed, singing my favorite song by the summer window. At that time, he was radiant, with a brilliant future, shining like a morning star. But overnight, he was embroiled in scandals, fell from grace, and vanished. Just as I was about to pay, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, answered the phone, and immediately heard my stepsister's voice on the other end. She cleared her throat and said, "Selena, you've heard about Simon and me getting engaged, right? Cut to the chase, I don't have time." "No wonder Simon doesn't like you," I impatiently replied. She chuckled and continued, "Will you attend the company annual meeting in 2 days? Although I snatched your fiancé, Simon, and I still want to get your blessing in person." Before I could respond, the vendor handed me the hot dog he had prepared. "Here's your hot dog," he said, looking at me. I hung up the phone, took the hot dog from him, and accepted it. As the evening sky turned pink, our hands briefly brushed against each other, exchanging a second of warmth. "Let's make a deal," I said to the vendor. "You pretend to be my boyfriend, and I'll buy all your hot dogs for the next 10 years. The words sounded like something a mental patient would say, and I thought he would refuse. But to my surprise, his dull eyes met mine, and after a few seconds, he nodded and gave me his contact information. 2 years ago, in that extremely hot summer, Felix participated in a talent show organized by a television station. In the first episode of the show, he was assigned to Class A, and in every subsequent performance, he consistently ranked in the top 10, never falling out of the top 5. At that time, many people were supporting Felix on social media, saying that despite coming from a small company, he still had such strong talent and deserved a chance to debut. However, in a shocking turn of events, Felix unexpectedly finished last in the final performance and was eliminated. On the contrary, a trainee from the same company who had originally been the least favored, ended up debuting as part of a group in first place. After the show ended, before people could express their sympathy for Felix, his management company suddenly released a lengthy statement accusing Felix of various wrongdoings. They claimed that during the years Felix was under contract, not only did he have character issues, but he also acted arrogantly and insulted staff members even before his debut. Furthermore, he demanded that the company create a persona of a talented songwriter for him, claiming that songs the company had purchased were actually written by him. Under the statement, the company also included some chat records, where individuals with their identities concealed were using vulgar language and berating staff members for not buying him his preferred breakfast. The final straw for Felix was an accusation from a female staff member. In the video, she had tears in her eyes as she recounted the harassment she had endured from Felix over the years. Beside her, the company's boss gently patted her shoulder and consolingly said, "It's all in the past, everything is in the past." After the statement was released, within minutes Felix's name surged to the top of the hot search list. That night, no matter when I checked the trending topics, the real-time comments kept refreshing and were filled with insults and curses. Overnight, his company announced the termination of his contract, his support group disbanded, fans turned away, and people even went online to curse him, saying supporting him was the biggest mistake of their lives. However, it shouldn't have been like this. Such a talented and brave young man shouldn't have been treated this way. Throughout the long night, no matter how much I tried to clarify on his behalf, within seconds, my articles would disappear as if Felix was the unforgivable person they painted him to be. Until the next morning, when I opened Twitter, I saw a hot topic about Felix responding to the originality controversy. Half an hour ago, Felix had posted on Twitter with a picture of several blank sheets of paper with the basic music notes of a song, showing signs of multiple revisions on the paper. I zoomed into the image and saw the name of the song written above the music notes, titled Summer Window. He said, "This song was written by me for the girl I like, and cannot be discredited by you. Everything else is up to you." After the company's annual meeting that day, the news of Felix being my possible boyfriend quickly reached my dad's ears, and he insisted that I bring Felix home for dinner. I opened my phone, found Felix, and sent a message. My dad insists I bring you home for dinner." After a few seconds of contemplation, I added, "If you're not comfortable, it's okay." Before I could finish the second sentence, Felix's message had already arrived, and the white dialog box read, "I can come anytime." My fingers hesitated on the keyboard, unsure of how to respond. Moments later, Felix sent another message. After all, you've been the sponsor of my hot dogs for 10 years. I silently chuckled in front of the screen, typed a few words, and sent, well, let's meet tomorrow. The next evening, I brought Felix back to my old house. As soon as we entered, I saw Lily standing at the door, but Simon was nowhere to be seen. Since they confirmed their relationship, the two had been inseparable, sticking together like glue. Behind me, Felix carried a few gift boxes and stepped inside. Upon seeing him, Lily's lips immediately curved into a smile, assessing him from head to toe. I glanced at her and said, why are you standing here? Good dogs should stay out of the way, move aside. Subsequently, Lily put on that innocent and harmless facade, puckering her lips and saying, Felix, Selena is so fierce, isn't she? Then, Lily picked up a pair of slippers and placed them next to Felix. Felix, wear these, they have a couple pattern design with mine. I lifted my head and looked at Lily. She seemed like a hungry wolf, tired of the previous target and once again setting sights on the new prey that appeared by my side. As Lily spoke, Felix shook his head, casually wore a pair of plain slippers without a pattern. Then, he strode to the shoe cabinet against the wall and picked up a pair of women's slippers. Selena, why don't you wear these? They match the ones I'm wearing. He said, turning around, crossing past Lily, standing in front of me, bending down, and placing the slippers at my feet. Squatting halfway, he lowered his head to untie my shoelaces. Surprised by this intimate gesture, I quickly refused. Felix, you don't have to. Before I could finish, Felix interrupted me with a gentle voice, Selena, let me do this for you. As I held back and looked at Felix, with an expression of a child waiting to be praised, he understandably declared, I'm great, right? Standing back up, he looked at me, his expression resembling a child waiting for approval. I nodded and said, very impressive. So, you'll have to buy my hot dogs for another year since I make them so poorly. You're the only one willing to buy them. His words amused me, and I teased softly, so, just one more year? It's not easy to have an unfortunate person like me with no taste buds. Why not let me buy them for 10 years? I playfully teased him, hoping to see him blush, just like 3 years ago. Unexpectedly, he turned his head and softly responded, well, if I could, I wish I could make hot dogs for you for dozens of years, until I become an old man and can't do it anymore. This time, it was my turn to blush. During dinner, my dad sat upright, asking Felix many personal questions, from his age to his work, and inquiring about how many family members he had and what they did, giving off a vibe similar to a census. To an unsuspecting person, they might think he was a great dad, but who would have imagined that he was a man who cheated on his wife with her best friend and abandoned his wife and daughter. Sitting beside me, Felix was honest and only took a few bites of the food, answering my dad's questions throughout the meal. Uncle, my name is Felix, an only child, with both parents being teachers. He paused, then continued, I run a small business now, but previously, pausing again, I used to be a trainee. My dad's act of preparing to serve food suddenly stopped, and he looked at Felix quizzically, asking, then why didn't you enter the entertainment industry? This question hit a nerve, and I instinctively turned to look at Felix. He lowered his head, staring at the bowl in front of him, and muttered, because I wasn't good enough. Before he could finish his sentence, Lily let out a cold laugh from the opposite side. Looking at me, she snidely remarked, it was all due to some jinx. A jinx who not only caused harm to her own mother but also has to bring trouble to others. My dad turned to Lily upon mentioning the past. Just as he was about to react, my stepmother's hand, painted with bright red nail polish, gently rested on my dad's shoulder. Calm down, don't argue with the child. Then she turned to me, seemingly casually saying, moreover, Lily didn't say anything wrong. If it wasn't for Selena's carelessness, her mother wouldn't have had that accident, let alone that I'd slammed the chopsticks on the table with a loud bang, and the wooden chopsticks made a piercing noise against the glass table, catching everyone's attention. Feeling nauseous, I said, I need some fresh air, I'm going outside. Saying that, I stood up and headed straight for the balcony. A few minutes later, as I walked down from the balcony, passing the bathroom, I saw Lily standing there. With her arms crossed, a smile on her face, she was face to face with someone. Taking a few more steps forward, I finally saw the person standing in front of her was Felix. He had his back to me, leaning against the doorframe, in close proximity to Lily. In the next moment, Lily raised her hand, placed it on Felix's shoulder, and slowly wrapped her fingers around his neck. A gust of wind passed by me suddenly. Not far away, Lily noticed me, a victorious smile curled on her lips. Then, she tiptoed closer to Felix's lips. Suddenly, Felix forcefully pushed Lily away, taking a few steps back, creating distance between them. Lily's voice, filled with frustration, echoed in the corridor, do you know that even Selena's own mother called her a jinx? What does she have that's so special? You have to choose her over me? Finally, Lily tore off her facade in front of Felix, revealing a malicious expression. She seemed like she wanted to say more, but Felix cut in. Lily, please have some self-respect. Felix's cold voice cut through, as icy as a winter's day. First, she is my girlfriend, not the jinx you claim her to be. He raised his hand to block himself from Lily approaching again, saying, secondly, this is our second meeting, and you called me here behind Selena's back. That's disrespectful to her. Just as Felix finished speaking, Lily sneered. Don't you want to know who is the one who offended the big shot and got blacklisted by the company back then? Lily's words hit me like a tsunami, bringing back a painful memory that was a memory more painful than witnessing my mother's death with my own eyes. For a moment, I stood frozen in place, unable to move. Suddenly, a gust of evening wind swept through the corridor, carrying Felix's voice so light it was like a breeze. I don't want to know, and I don't need to know. It's you, Lily, Felix continued, taking a step forward, looking down at Lily from a higher vantage point. I can ignore you out of respect for Selena, but maybe it's because of your mother. You seem to lack manners. Not picking at old wounds and not poking at people's sore spots are the most basic manners a person should have. Plus, in this world, not everything can be obtained through snatching. Isn't that right, Lily? After speaking, Felix, who had been facing away from me, suddenly turned around. He lifted his head and with just one look, he spotted me standing in the corner. At that moment, the frown on his face instantly softened, and his eyes under the fine bangs carried a smile, slightly curved like a crescent moon in the sky. Felix looked at me and reached out his hand in my direction. Then, in a voice as gentle as a spring breeze, he said, Selena, come, let's go back. I nodded, walking towards him, covering Felix's hand with mine, and then intertwining our fingers. After dinner, I prepared to leave with Felix. As we reached the door, it suddenly swung open from outside, and a man walked in. Following his gaze upwards, I saw the man standing at the door, looking directly at me with an emotion only I could understand. Henry. The stepbrother brought by my stepmother to taunt me for fun. He glanced at me, then at Felix standing next to me, and then took a step forward, grabbing my arm tightly. Selena, who gave you the permission to get so close to another man? Feeling Henry's grip getting tighter, I whispered, Henry, let go, you're hurting me. Before I could finish, Felix quickly approached me, pushing Henry away sharply. Selena said, let go. Didn't you hear? Selena. Then he lowered his head, glanced at the wrinkles on his suit, raised his head again, and approached me. If one day he finds out your hidden secret, I wonder if he would still defend you in the same way. Coming out of the old house, Felix invited me to take a walk up the nearby mountain. As we climbed halfway up, I looked up and saw a temple partially visible. Suddenly, memories of 8 years ago when I came to the mountain alone to pray after my mother's accident flooded my mind. Climbing up while speaking to Felix, I said, I came here once before, but my wishes were never fulfilled. Felix's voice came from behind me, I came here once too, and my wish did come true. I stopped in my tracks and turned to look at him. Really? What wish did you make? The evening glow illuminated him, making him look warm and gentle. He raised his head, meeting my gaze. At that moment, his eyes were like a pool of water, reflecting ripples, faintly showing my silhouette. I'm not telling you. Half an hour later, we finally reached the mountain top. Looking down from the mountain, the entire city lay before us. I gazed at the landscape below, swallowing hard. Beside me, Felix looked at me. Wait here, I'll go buy you a bottle of water. As Felix left, I wandered around the temple alone. Walking through the memories, I reached the tree of blessings in the temple. The tree towered tall, with many blessing plaques tied with red strings hanging on its trunk. I examined each blessing plaque from left to right, seeing wishes for happiness and love until I reached the end. Suddenly, as if struck by lightning, I stood frozen in place. A blessing plaque was being gently swayed by the evening breeze, and at the bottom, a red tassel was swaying. Wishing Selena peace, health, happiness, and eternal love. Beneath the neat handwriting, there was a very familiar name written boldly, Felix. The date was March 28, 2021. It was the day 2 years ago when our debut battle ended, the day he sacrificed his bright future to save me. At the age of 17, my father cheated on my mother with her best friend, leading to their divorce and his immediate remarriage with my stepmother. He also brought in my stepmother's son and daughter from a previous marriage to live in our old house. My mother, with worthless belongings, was kicked out by her former friend. She looked at me and spat. If it weren't for giving birth to you, how would I have become a yellow-faced woman, or have my man stolen by someone else? You're a jinx. Anyone who has a relationship with you will be unlucky. Not long after, she fell into depression and drove us to a desolate suburb, crashing the car into a concrete wall. Later, holding my mother's photo, I stood at the entrance of the old house. My father held my stepmother with one arm and young Lily with the other, with Henry following behind, not related by blood, but treated as a family by my father. He glanced at me and then my suitcase. Selena, you can come back, but let me make it clear, your aunt is in charge of this house now. Don't provoke her, or I won't keep you either. Overnight, my life turned into a roller coaster ride without giving me time to breathe. As my mother once said, maybe I was indeed a jinx, and anyone associated with me would face misfortune. My mother was like that, and 2 years ago, Felix was no different. Suddenly, as I stood there, someone jogged towards me from behind, the footsteps getting closer. I turned around and saw Felix standing under the deep blue sky with a pink sunset backdrop, a few birds gliding in front of the gradually setting Sunday. It's only now that I realize that in my dim and gloomy youth, there was once someone in an unknown corner praying for me. Writing the simplest yet hardest wish in the world to fulfill. I suddenly wanted to ask Felix if one day, when he truly learns my secret, would he regret it. After descending from the mountain, I drove Felix back home. As the car entered the residential area and turned towards the innermost building, I sensed Felix looking at me beside him. Inside the dimly lit car, we remained silent, with a melodious female voice singing a touching love song. After a few seconds, I heard Felix softly say, "Until next time, Selena." As he spoke, he got out of the car and gently closed the door. Only then did I dare to lean over and watch his straight figure slowly walk into the building. Soon, he vanished from my sight, and the light that had lit up from opening the car door went out. Looking at the darkness before me, I nodded to myself, answering his earlier words, "Until next time, Felix." But deep down, I secretly hoped that the next time could come sooner. I turned back, placing my hand on the steering wheel, about to turn the car around, when suddenly, the car door was opened from outside. I looked over and saw Felix, who had seemingly disappeared, standing outside the car once again. Bowing slightly to meet my gaze, he softly asked, "Would you like to come in and visit my place?" I looked at him, gripping the steering wheel tighter, and in a moment of silence, the slight sound of the leather on the wheel being squeezed could be heard. I licked my slightly dry lips and replied, "But, Felix, if I go in, it won't be just a casual visit." Before I could finish, Felix raised an eyebrow with a playful smile. "If it's you, I'm willing to accompany you till the end, my benefactor." Upon hearing his words, I turned off the car, opened the door, and walked towards Felix. "Lead the way." Upon reaching the second floor, Felix took out the keys, opened the door, and gestured for me to enter first. Standing in the entrance, I surveyed the space filled with Felix's aura. The first thing that caught my eye was the living room, meticulously arranged, and even cleaner than my own as a girl. Behind me, Felix placed the keys on the coffee table, producing a crisp sound. "Let me pour you a glass of water, feel free to sit wherever." With Felix's footsteps heading towards the kitchen, I walked into the living room, noticing a black guitar tucked away in a corner. I was surprised to see that after 3 long years, the guitar looked as good as new. Looking to the right, there was a 5-tier transparent storage cabinet containing various small items. At the very top, a black sign was prominently displayed, bearing Felix's name. It was the sign I had accidentally lost during the drama of 2 years ago. At that moment, my heart felt like a sea, creating tidal waves after an earthquake and landslides. I thought I was pretending well. But I didn't expect that he seemed to have known my name for a long time. He also knew that I was the one who caused him to be banned by the director, stole his debut position, had fabricated scandals by the company, and was ultimately shunned by everyone. 3 years ago, on my 23rd birthday, which was also Lily's birthday, my dad and stepmother held a grand birthday party for Lily at the old house, leaving me wandering the streets alone. Suddenly, someone lightly tapped my shoulder from behind. As I turned around, a boy was standing behind me, holding a black guitar in his hand. He looked at me, his cheeks tinged with a faint blush, and cautiously pointed at my pants, softly saying, "Sorry, I was playing the guitar over there just now, and I saw that your pants seemed a bit dirty." I exclaimed, and quickly moved my backpack to cover the bloodstain on my pants. He seemed to sense my embarrassment, smiled gently, and said, "Don't worry, I know there's a supermarket ahead that's still open. I'll take you there." He originally walked ahead of me with the guitar in hand, but after a few steps, he suddenly turned around and walked behind me, following me step by step while maintaining a distance. Amidst the laughter of children playing on the pedestrian street and the voices of street vendors, I heard him say, "I'll walk behind you to cover and protect you, so you can walk ahead without worry." Unintentionally, his low and gentle voice gradually calmed me down. That evening, I sat on the stone steps opposite him, listening to him sing, with some passers-by coming and going between us. In the following days, I kept encountering him at the same spot on that street. Gradually, I noticed that he often sat there alone, singing songs from dusk till dark, even though no one would stop to listen to him. At that time, his only audience was me. Every day at the same time, I would wear a mask, sit on the same stone steps, and listen to him sing. His voice came through the microphone into my ears without hindrance, and when he sang love songs, his pronunciation carried a hint of charm, tenderness, and passion. In the bustling street, as long as he sang, I listened. In my view, only the two of us were clear, while everyone else was blurred, swiftly passing between us. Later, I learned his name, and that he had been learning to play the guitar since elementary school and was now a trainee who would surely debut and become a famous star in the future. Maybe out of insecurity, or maybe out of fear of what my mom had said, I always kept my distance from him during those days of listening to him sing, never approaching him, fearing he might be jinxed because of me. One evening, with no one else around Felix, he announced into the microphone, "The next song is my own composition, written for the girl I like." Sitting there with his guitar in his lap, his slender fingers skillfully strumming the chords, even in the dim light, he exuded a starlight aura till the other sounds gradually faded, leaving only the melody he sang swirling and lingering in my ears. Listening to this song, I felt like I could see him as a young boy. The boy in neat school uniform standing by the window. The spring breeze blowing the curtain behind him, revealing the pot of pure white, perfectly blooming jasmine on the windowsill. Lost in thoughts, he suddenly looked up in my direction while I instinctively lowered my head, blending into the crowd. That brief glance lingered in my heart for 3 years. Felix persisted for a long time, finally waiting for a passerby to stop in front of him to listen to him complete a song and then applaud. Every night, wearing a mask, I stood among the crowd, holding up a sign with his name written on it. At some point, someone recorded a video of him singing and posted it online. In the video, Felix's profile was seen, eyes closed, singing his original song. Soon, he gained some popularity on a certain platform, with more and more people learning his name through the sign held high in the video. On a certain day in the second year, after finishing his song, Felix said into the microphone, "I signed up for a talent show competition, where the top 10 contestants can debut and sign a permanent contract with a TV station." Then, he looked out at the crowd, searching left and right, as if looking for something. Finally, his gaze settled on the sign I was holding. "You all will come to my concert, right?" After the show started, I passed by that bustling pedestrian street countless times, but the familiar stone steps no longer had a boy with a black guitar singing love songs. Fortunately, after the show aired, Felix performed well, appearing repeatedly on the hot search lists. Gradually, he gained many fans and had a few fan clubs supporting him. During his first performance, I sat in front of the computer screen, seeing many people in the audience holding signs with Felix's name written on them. Numerous signs swayed in the hands of fans, creating a colorful sea of lights along with Felix's singing. During the post-competition interview, the host asked him, "Have you had any memorable experiences during your training career?" Felix brought the microphone to his lips, raised his head, looked at the camera, and confidently replied, "Yes. When I was a trainee, there was a girl who always came to listen to me sing. At that time, no one knew me, and in the noisy crowd, only she would listen to me sing, listen to me talk, and only she held up my sign." The host joked, "That fan must be very beautiful, right?" Felix shook his head and said, "She always wore a mask, I never saw what she looked like." At the final performance, I bought a ticket, wanting to see that boy standing at the peak, embracing his destined starry path. During the break of the show, just as I stepped out of the restroom, a man walked towards me. Red-faced, reeking of alcohol, he brushed past me, then suddenly grabbed my collar with one hand and covered my mouth with the other, preventing me from making a sound. With force, he dragged me to a secluded corner and reached for my clothes. In my frantic struggle, I heard footsteps approaching, and soon, a figure appeared behind the man and kicked him hard. Then, he grabbed the man's collar, flinging him against the wall. As the man turned around, he faced the person standing in front of me. "Felix, I warn you, don't meddle in other people's affairs." Before the man could finish his sentence, Felix's hand had already clenched into a fist, striking the man again. "Felix, I'm the show producer, dare you hit me?" Felix raised his arm and stood in front of me. "Yes, I hit you." The man winced in pain, covering his face, still intoxicated, slurring threats. "Felix, you're already acting like a big star before making your debut? Do you believe I can make you disappear overnight in this industry?" After these words, Felix gave a cold smile. "Go ahead. Say, and I'll hit you." That night, in the final competition, what was supposed to be Felix's moment to debut turned into a last-place finish. The company and the show producers colluded to spread false scandals online, leading to his contract termination. This online bullying continued for half a year, with baseless rumors sweeping through his social platforms, and despite all my explanations, no one was willing to listen or believe. Through the locker, I saw Felix slowly approaching me not far away. Eventually, he stood behind me and softly spoke, "It looks like this sign has finally found its owner." I turned to look at Felix, meeting his gaze. He reached out, handing me a cup. "This is ginger tea. I used to see you drinking ginger tea while I sang on that street." I never thought that one day he would recognize me as the person who came to listen to him sing every day. For a moment, I forgot to reach out and accept, just staring at him. Felix smiled slightly and put the cup in my hand. At that moment, the freshly brewed ginger tea was warming in my palm, and I heard him say, "Did you think that I didn't recognize you?" Felix raised his hand, lightly stroking my head twice, as if treating a little cat, silly. "The moment I saw you again in front of the hot dog stand, wearing a mask, I instantly recognized you." He opened his arms, carefully hugged me, gradually tightening his arms. "Selena, listen to me. You are not a jinx. Everything they say is wrong. On the contrary, you are my lucky charm. 3 years ago, the day I met you on the street was supposed to be my last day of singing on that street. At that time, I thought, after singing on that day, I would give up. It was on that day that I met you, and thanks to you, I could keep singing, and so many people liked me that I buried my head in his embrace, breathing in the scent of his sweater freely, letting his unique fragrance fill my nostrils. Then, I heard his voice from above, though brief, it was worth this life, and everything I have is because of you. Early the next morning, my phone buzzed a few times next to the bedside table, waking me from my sleep. I opened the phone to find several messages and a video clip from the day of Felix's debut battle in 2021. The first few seconds of the video were uneventful, with only the time rapidly scrolling in the top left corner. Suddenly, at 30 seconds, 2 people appeared in the surveillance footage, with the man's face clearly visible. I widened my eyes, closely watching the people in the video. It turned out to be the television producer and me, the person he was dragging along. In the video, he viciously threw me to the ground, and I knew exactly what was about to happen next. The video abruptly stopped the next second. Exiting the video, I saw a message in the chat box, "If you want this video, you know what to do. Selena." At the top of the chat box, a name was prominently displayed, Henry. I sighed. Despite my internal conflict, I still called him. A few seconds later, a lazy male voice came through the phone, "Selena?" He chuckled, saying, "I never thought it'd be so easy to make my Selena call me." I didn't want to beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "Give me that surveillance video, tell me what you want." Subsequently, accompanied by deafening music drumbeats from the phone and the sultry voice of women around, Henry's deep voice came through the receiver. "I want you, Selena. Selena, if you can appear in front of me in the next 10 minutes, I might consider giving you that video." I hung up the phone, drove straight to the bar under Henry's name. The waitress led me to the booth where Henry was sitting. I opened the door, and a beautiful scene lay before my eyes. Henry, lying on the couch, turned his head upon hearing the sound. Although he looked at me, he spoke to the woman beside him, saying, "Get up, stand further away." The woman stood straight and walked to the back of the couch, turning in my direction. With just one glance, I recognized her. She was the employee who had posted the video on social media, accusing Felix of harassing her. I closed the door, walked into the booth, sat on a chair, and raised my chin towards the woman. "I should have known it was you all along." As soon as I finished speaking, Henry chuckled. "Selena wants to help that idol?" I replied coldly, "He has his own name." As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw Henry's smile slowly fade away. "Henry, what do you want?" Before I could finish my sentence, Henry sat upright, his eyes staring intensely at me behind his golden-rimmed glasses. He then stood up, took slow steps towards me, and with his icy finger hooked under my chin, forced me to look up at him. "What I want is simple. I'll give you that complete surveillance video if you give up your shares in your father's company." As soon as he finished speaking, I nodded without any hesitation. "No problem, I give up." Surprisingly, upon hearing my answer, Henry's eyebrows furrowed, lips pursed, and a displeasure flashed in his piercing eyes. I knew he was angry. Eventually, his hand dropped to his side, he took a few steps back, and asked in a low voice, "Selena, if that year, instead of bullying you, I had offered you the best things in the world, would the person standing beside you today be me?" Checking the surveillance video, I didn't look up and replied directly, "No." "Henry, have you forgotten that winter when you pushed me into the abandoned mansion's swimming pool?" He stood on the shore, watching me struggle in the freezing water, waiting for my plea for mercy. "Poor the television producer who worked for you, now abandoned by you." Henry adjusted his glasses. "Selena, what do you mean by that?" Putting away my phone, I looked up, meeting his playful gaze. 2 years ago, you found the producer, got him drunk, and instigated him to do that to me. Later, you collaborated with Felix's company to release those fabricated scandals, leading to his downfall. "Henry, do you think I'm still the little girl you and your mother bullied back then in the company?" I didn't say anything because I remember that it was you who dug me out of the rubble that winter, took me to the hospital, and saved my life. Putting away my phone, I walked towards the door. As I passed him, I whispered softly, "Henry, whatever feelings you have for me, let's not see each other again from now on." When I got back home, I created a new account on Twitter, added subtitles to the surveillance video, and uploaded it. Within minutes, the video was being shared rapidly by enthusiastic netizens, and the views spiked at that night. The topic of the television producer abusing his power surged to the top of the trending list. With concrete evidence and witness testimony, the producer had no way to refute it. Seeing the situation grow out of his control, he finally wrote a post on Twitter, apologizing to Felix and me, promising never to repeat his actions. The comments section was a stark contrast to the cyberbullying back then. It turned out that Felix was wronged. I knew it. How can you make up for his lost potential? Am I the only one who remembers how talented Felix was in singing and dancing? It's clear as day he was wronged. After 2 years, people finally remembered how talented and underappreciated he was back then. Letting out a long breath, my phone vibrated a few times. I looked down to see a call from my assistant. "Sis, something's wrong." "Felix is in trouble." I rushed to the incident site as described by my assistant, which happened on the same pedestrian street as before. Many pedestrians were gathered around where Felix used to sing. Some were chatting, some recording with their phones. Dead in an instant, Henry's cold-blooded face flashed through my mind, and I couldn't care less about anything else. I used all my strength to squeeze through the crowd. What I saw was Felix, unharmed. He was sitting on the familiar steps, with a guitar in his arms. When he saw me, his eyes instantly lit up. The lightboard I once held was now placed beside him, with his name shining brightly in the night. But now, another name was added next to Felix's in bold and powerful handwriting. It was my name. Before I could react, my assistant appeared out of nowhere, dragging my arm and pulling me in front of Felix, face to face. Following that, Felix gently strummed the guitar strings, and the familiar chords filled my ears. In the twilight on the pedestrian street, vendors were shouting their wares. Under the dim yellow street lights, the trees along the sidewalk had sprouted new green leaves. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, Felix softly sang, "I want to go to summer with you, to see the sea, to fall in love." I could vaguely guess what he wanted to do. Nervously swallowing, my breath quickened. A few minutes later, Felix set the guitar down, bent down, and took something out of his backpack in a plastic bag. "Selena, you said you wanted to eat my hot dogs for a lifetime." I took it seriously. I lifted my head, and amidst the cheering of the crowd, our eyes met. I nodded without hesitation, ready to accept it. But just before I could touch Felix's fingers, he suddenly bent down, tilted his head slightly, quickly closed the distance between us, and softly kissed the corner of my lips. He whispered in my ear with a slightly hoarse voice, "Selena, you can't back out." I nodded, opening my arms, embracing him around the waist. "Okay, I promise you." Finally, at the age of 25, I reached out and caught the star I had wanted since I was 23, in the vast sea.